morning, everybody. Toby Stinson here with the Alcid Transportation Museum. And today we're going to be talking about one of our most important, and I feel one of my favorite artifacts here in the museum, which is the Bill Milliken M1 Special. And that is the aircraft that we have hanging over our heads here in the museum's Education, Science, and Industry Center. But like a lot of the machines and vehicles and equipment we have on the floor, it's really looking at it as an artifact, as a moment in time. And what I'd really like to do is talk about Bill Milliken, the person, because his story is absolutely amazing. One of the things that, in getting back into looking at the Milliken Special, which we've had here since about 2000 and late 1990s, I should say, is Bill Milliken is one of those amazing people where we're almost living in his world and we don't even realize it. And Bill Milliken, the person, being a lifelong Mainer, growing up here, raising 3 kids who are Mainers, Bill Milliken, the person, is an inspiration, I think, for every Maine student because of his ingenuity, his innovation, his creativity, and his enthusiasm for what he did. In looking at his plane, Bill is a great model for every kid in the state of Maine, and then every young person or lifelong learner going beyond. So this is Bill Milliken here, the photograph that we have here in the wall with his plane. Bill Milliken was born and raised in Old Town, Maine. Old Town, Maine is famous for being on the Penobscot River, classic Maine mill town, paper mills, and as till today, famous for the Old Town canoe. And if you look really closely at Bill Milliken's plane, which he started building in the late 1920s, you can see that there's some canoe techniques and materials embodied in this plane. So Bill was a very curious, energetic person, lived to be 101 years old, born 1911, and his entire life, from an early age, starting in the 1920s, he was building push carts. The Miller 8-cylinder overhead valves that ran the Indianapolis 500, he was fascinated with those. His first push cart looked like a Bill Miller Special. He was building 2-cylinder powered go-karts, push carts. By the time he was 15 years old, he'd already built probably 4 or 5 different gasoline-powered vehicles, going from 4 wheels to motorcycles, and he was just enamored by that. Beginning in 1928, he started building what's over our head here, the Bill Milliken Special, the M1. From 1928 through 1933, he was building this in his family's home in Old Town. A brilliant mathematical mind, Bill eventually went on to MIT and graduated in 1934. So while he's a young kid finishing high school and then going to MIT, over a 4-year period, he's building his own home-built aircraft in his house in Old Town. It's powered by a 4-cylinder Henderson motorcycle engine. And so what he's doing is what we try to model in the classroom is he's putting into best practice what he's learning in the classroom, and he's experimenting in his own mind with reading and books and things like that in his own hobby project. And he's building off of what he did as a kid. It's almost as if like your father comes home and says, go build tree houses, here's a hammer, and walks away. You are learning through experimentation. Today in the classroom, we call this performance-based learning. That's what Bill's doing, okay? And it becomes part of your life. What's amazing about Bill is, and I had to make notes, I'm sorry, because the more I looked into Bill Milliken and we knew who he was, and we'll get back to his aircraft in a second, we're living in Bill Milliken's world and we don't really realize it. What an amazing, amazing life of accomplishments, aside from living 101 years old. Bill graduated from MIT in 1934 and then immediately was snatched up and went into working for Boeing in Seattle, Washington. And his lifelong passion was stability in aeronautics and mathematical testing, okay? So Bill started doing wind tunnel testing with Boeing, and to put it into the coming event of the late 1930s, a lot of innovations from World War II in the aviation, Bill Milliken was directly involved. The B-17 went through multiple event changes and formula changes through its life. He was involved with wind tunnel testing on the B-17. He was part of the inaugural XB-29 development team, which became the B-29, which was famous for World War II, long-range bomber, Fat Man and Little Boy, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But the B-29 aircraft was Bill Milliken's aeronautical, one of his early masterpieces, significant with that team. Post-war, he went on and was the co-founder of the Cornell University Aeronautics Library. The Cornell University's Aeronautical Library became one of the foremost researching areas after World War II for studying flight, stability, aeronautics, efficiency, flight control systems. He developed the mathematical formula for evaluating flight dynamics and measuring control. All this work led to every aircraft we fly on today is electronic servo powered flight-by-wire technology, where electronic servos control electronic hydraulic motors back on the wing. So every time you fly and you hear those noises in the wing, that's Bill Milliken, who really started all that research post-World War II. He went on to have a fabulous, amazing Hall of Fame aeronautical career in research, design, stability, wind tunnel testing. That's that side of it. Bill has another side as well, which we are filled with here in the museum if you look for examples of that. Post-World War II, going off of where he started as a childhood in Old Town, let's build a car and roll it down the street and see what we can jump, and then how's the math work in his mind. Bill became extremely important in what became known as the SCCA, the Sports Car Club of America. If you like racing, and we have examples here today, one of our volunteers here, Matt McComb, was a former SCCA national champion, Sports Car Club of America. One of our volunteers, Marianne Stevens, she's time for the SCCA, and it is everywhere, okay? The Trans Am Series. In 1948, Bill Milliken wrote the inaugural rules of competition for the Sports Car Club of America. He's in the Sports Car Club of America Hall of Fame. He ran in the inaugural Watkins Glen Grand Prix in 1948, driving a Bugatti. And there's even a tight hairpin 90-degree turn at Watkins Glen. On the third or fourth lap, he rolled the Bugatti into that place. Probably should have gotten killed, but didn't. Okay. And to this day at Watkins Glen, that hairpin turn is called Bill Milliken Corner. They named it after Bill, unofficially and then officially. Bill was extremely fascinated by aeronautics, stability, control, the math behind it. And then he got into racing. In his career, did over 100 road races. Even became involved in bringing the Formula One U.S. Grand Prix to the United States as a lead official and helping to develop that. But he got involved in applying his aeronautical work through the Cornell Laboratory to automotive development and research with stability, aeronautics, control, and handling. He was sponsored by General Motors, and in the 1950s did a lot of research on figuring out the mathematical equations to define what the stability is, how cars actually handle, tire testing. We have this in our cars today. We have electronic control. You turn the wheel, a sensor reads, adjusts. All that technology and applied to automobiles, which developed through aircraft, and Bill Milliken was funneled towards this development. Tires going at a high RPM, 50, 60, 100 miles an hour, race tires. He worked through Cornell Laboratory to establish, to this day, what is the most significant high-speed tire tester. So you can test the tires and how the compounds function and how they work together. He became astronomical, okay, not only in the stability, but figuring out the mathematical equations. So what he did for aeronautics by figuring out the test formulas for defining and measuring the response control to devices, he did that for automobiles. I'm a huge James Bond fan. So when I found this fact, it blew my mind. The 1974 film, The Man with the Golden Gun, probably one of the most significant automotive stunts in history. That's where the car goes, a modified AMX Gremlin, jumps off over a bridge, does a full barrel roll, and lands. That's not CGI. They actually did that. And when you come up with an idea of that, you probably think, we're not going to do this because that guy's going to get killed. Well, Bill Milliken actually mathematically proved that that stunt was possible. So when they went on to do that stunt, it was all based on the mathematical computations and calculations of Bill Milliken that proved this car, this speed, this roll, this weight, and he went RoboCop and did a bunch of little things. It could happen. So if you watch that movie, and you love James Bond, that's Bill Milliken. Again, we're living in Bill Milliken's world. We don't even really realize it. I apologize. I had to make notes because I could not recall all this stuff without doing this. He went on. He's in the SCCA Hall of Fame, Motorsports Hall of Fame, numerous aeronautical Hall of Fames, numerous awards. Later on in his years, he went back and raced more competition, even going to the premier historic racing event over in Europe, the Goodwood Festival of Speed. It's interesting being here at Owl's Head, where we get to be in tune with so many different worlds. The Sports Car Racing Society and the people that do Grand Prix and Formula One and road racing and the SCCA. And they're like, oh, Bill Milliken, he was such a racing pioneer. And then you have aviators come in here and they just see, oh, Bill Milliken, he was such an amazing person for aviation. And sometimes we need to connect the dots and just realize it all kind of started in Old Town Maine by a young kid with no TV, no internet. You had some magazines. Let's build a push cart, soapbox derby, and race it down the hill. Can we make it go? And where does it go from there? You put a little curiosity and enthusiasm. And you got to tell you got to be fearless because he'd probably gotten a lot of wrecks over his time. Okay. So now when you talk about that, now we come back to and you look up what we have hanging here. This is completely untouched, original. This is Bill Milliken's M1. He called it the Milliken Special. Built it and finished in 1933, and which was comparable to a lot of places and a lot of people in the early 20th century. They did their flight testing either in Ormond Beach down in Florida, like the Stanley Brothers with their world land speed record, okay? Or they did their flying and racing in Old Orchard Beach, Maine. Old Orchard Beach, Maine, which is famous still today as a resort community. They have the pier, great pier fries, Bill's Pizza. Okay, go down to Old Orchard, have some fun this summer. But was one of the premier racing and automotive and aviation testing sites in the early 20th century. Charles Lindbergh flew in there with the Spirit of St. Louis on his post tour. Couldn't get into Portland because of fog. And in reading about Bill Milliken, while he's a young kid in Old Town, playing with all these vehicles, building his cars, racing them down the street in 1926, 1927. We did a video a couple weeks ago. This young kid at 14 years old, Lindbergh flew the Atlantic. And that was a direct result of Lindbergh flying the Atlantic. And he switched from making all these motorized vehicles. He said, I want to build a plane. So in 1928, 1 year after Lindbergh flies the Atlantic, young Bill Milliken starts building his own plane. I wonder if I can do that too. And if you look really closely at it, you can see, in my opinion, in some of the materials, he's using I grew up in Old Town and we know how to build canoes. And what's an airplane other than a canoe in the air with some modifications? Okay. One of my favorite quotes here, which we have on our board here in our education area here that Megan and team had put together. The satisfaction of having made it into the air by my own bootstraps and surviving a hairy flight is more than outweighed the landing. Okay, he took off, it flew great. He came down, the hard pack speech was a little hard. Wheel dug in, flipped it on its nose. Every pilot in the early 20th century, and it's happened more frequently than you realize, has done a nose over. The propeller broke. We put the original propeller back on there. That's the propeller that Bill's holding that photo. That broke when he flipped it on the landing at Old Orchard. That's just a quick brushstroke of Bill Milliken, the person. And in doing this, again, I came back to started with the plane and lets people understand the aircraft that we have here. But when you really look at it, everything here, they're artifacts. So what is embodied in that? What you see is what's left of how this person envisioned certain things. So the next time you watch an old war movie, okay, and you watch a video on the History Channel, the B-29, you're getting ready to fly somewhere warm because it's cold in Maine, and you hear the the flight controls and the electronically powered hydraulics, that's all Bill Milliken. And not just aviation, but you drive down the road. And even today, okay, we have autonomous vehicles that are coming. We have autonomous driving. We have these certain sensors that electronic reading and control, hydraulic powered. That's all Bill Milliken. So that's a quick, broad brush, but I encourage you to have your own curiosity, figure out more about Bill Milliken, what we can learn from him. And as much as all of these things are important, I think the final lesson that I took away from this, I want more kids to just think and be curious like Bill Milliken. If you think and are curious and you want to know how things work and you have enthusiasm, look what you can actually do. But thanks for being here at the Allison Transportation Museum, and come see our stories because there's a lot you can learn.